That concludes general questions, and apologies to all those members who were unable to ask questions. I have to say that ministers were quite languid in some of their answers in the first half of that session, and so not everyone was able to be taken. We'll try and speed things up in the next session. And the reason why I think that's important is because we have had more questions for a First Minister's question session than ever before. In the history of this Parliament, I have been advised, so not everyone will be able to be taken. So members who do wish to ask a question, please press their request to speak buttons now. And the first person to ask a question will be Jack Middleton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, TV regulator Ofcom announced it had approved controversial plans to end STV's dedicated news coverage for the north of Scotland. These plans are deeply unpopular and mean my constituents have lost a news institution that they've trusted for decades. Broadcasting matters are, of course, reserved to Westminster, but the Labour Media Minister, Ian Murray, has assured me he will not intervene on this very issue. So what will the First Minister do to hold Ofcom to account for both their conduct throughout this process and for their obligations to protect local news? And can I also ask what steps his government can take to help retain jobs and wider economic activity linked to broadcasting in the north east of Scotland?
First Minister.
Professor, I agree entirely with the concerns that have been expressed by Mr Middleton on behalf of his constituents, and I expressed in Parliament before the election the deep unease I felt about the diminution of the STV North News production capability and broadcast because of the importance of reflecting broadcast interests across the whole of Scotland. I have written to Ofcom and to STV to urge them once again to ensure that they are meeting their obligations to audiences and to dedicated journalists, and reiterate my opposition, my wholehearted opposition to the decision that Ofcom has made, which I think is ignorant of the needs and the circumstances of the north and the north east of Scotland. I know that Mr Middleton is meeting tomorrow with the Cabinet Secretary for Culture and the Minister for Business and Fair Work to establish some further actions that can be taken. I assure him the Government will do all that we can to support him in the efforts he's taken forward on behalf of his constituents and those of many other members in the north and north east of Scotland.
Daniel Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware of Alan Milburn's interim report into young people not in education, employment or training. And while it does set out that Scotland is performing marginally better than the UK, the trend is in the same direction. Crucially, the proportion of young Scots who are NEET and economically inactive has increased from 42% in 2016 to 60% in 2026, with more and more young Scots not looking for work at all. It highlights a growing structural gap between young people's skills and talents and the routes to employment. Despite this, the Scottish Government's apprenticeship starts have declined every year since 2021 and are down on 10 years ago. So does the First Minister agree with the broad analysis in the report, and what will he do to arrest and reverse the trend in modern apprenticeship starts?
First Minister.
I think there's a lot to, although Alan Milburn's report was focused on services in England, I recognise that there are lessons to be drawn from the conclusions that he has set out, and ensuring the maximum participation of young people in the labour market is obviously a priority of the Scottish Government. In terms of positive destinations from schools, which is an important measure that the Government assesses our performance in this respect, 95.7% of school leavers were in a positive destination 3 months after leaving school in 2024-25, which I think is an encouraging indicator of the pathways that are in place for young people. However, we must be very focused in supporting schools, in supporting young people in taking forward those positive pathways. The Government has a commitment to delivering 150,000 modern apprenticeships during this parliamentary term. We will pursue that approach. And obviously, if there's areas of common ground that we can work with Mr Johnson on, I know his long-standing interest in these questions, we are very happy to do so, because I want to see the maximum level of economic participation, because across a range of different sectors, we face challenges in the availability of employees to contribute to our economy, and young people have a vital contribution to make.
Hugh Manivannan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, given that no rent control areas are likely to be designated until summer 2027 at the earliest, that rents have increased above inflation in Edinburgh and the Lothians East, and that the increasing cost of living and high interest rates will further squeeze renters who are already struggling, what interim protections will you put in place for private tenants, including mid-market rent, facing unaffordable rent increases while the rent condition assessment and designation process under the Scotland and the Housing Scotland Act will be completed?
First Minister.
This is an important issue, and of course in the legislation that we passed in Parliament before the election, we put in place exactly those rent control arrangements, which I think are an important part of the safeguards that Cumann is searching for on behalf of constituents. So I believe that framework is appropriate. Obviously, the government will continue to assess through the other housing support that we make available, the assistance that can be available. And in the election campaign, I advanced the argument that renters who are in a situation where the properties that they occupy are being put on the market, that they will have the first right of opportunity to purchase at a sustainable market rent. So the government has put in place the legislative arrangements to ensure that the objectives that have been sought can be fulfilled, and obviously we will take, as part of the government's wider programme, measures to support individuals who are facing cost of living challenges, recognising the significance of that issue to individuals today.
Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. Loganair have announced plans to cut services between Inverness and Orkney, Shetland and the Western Isles. They cite a lack of support from the government-owned Highlands and Islands Airports Limited for the cuts, which could get even worse if further reassurances aren't provided in the coming days. These are lifeline routes for all three communities, and cuts will affect all those who rely on the services, including many hospital patients, potentially pushing up costs for NHS boards. So will the First Minister now instruct Hyle to reach an agreement with Loganair that protects lifeline air services to and from Orkney, Shetland and the Western Isles as a matter of urgency?
First Minister.
Want Highlands Islands Airport Limited and Loganair to work collaboratively to ensure that these services can be sustained. I recognise the importance of these services, particularly for some of the issues in connection to access to healthcare services, and the Cabinet Secretary for Transport will make sure that there is appropriate dialogue taking place between Loganair and Hyle to ensure that everything that can be done to safeguard these services is in fact put in place.
Stephen Bonner.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My constituent, Mark Somerville, was diagnosed with motor neuron disease in 2023, a rapidly progressive and cruel illness, which for Mark and so many others means they simply do not have time to wait for slow-moving systems and delayed decisions. Our manifesto made welcome commitments on MND, but progress in terms of specialist care and support for clinical research demands meaningful focus as soon as possible. So can the First Minister outline what he will do to ensure progress is made, and will he meet with the Mark Somerville Foundation and hear directly about the challenges being faced and the promising work the Foundation is already undertaking to support those living with motor neuron disease?
First Minister.
I'd be very happy to meet with the Mark Somerville Foundation, and the Health Secretary will also take a keen interest in this issue, so I welcome very much the points that have been raised by Stephen Bonner. It is vital that where individuals have a diagnosis as challenging and as devastating as motor neuron disease, that we have in place the support services and the assistance to aid those individuals and their families as quickly as possible. The Government is trying to ensure that through the funding we put in place through the NHS Research Scotland Neuroprogressive Disease Network, that we will be able to provide enhanced levels of support, but some of the learning from the Mark Somerville Foundation will be helpful to us in advancing these issues, and I look forward to those discussions with Mr Bonner.
Kate Campbell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Following thousands of cyclists pedalling on this Parliament on Saturday to ask for safer streets, what assurances can the First Minister give that getting infrastructure right, preventing deaths on our roads and making sure that everyone feels that cycling is accessible to them will be at the heart of the transport strategy of this government?
First Minister.
So the National Transport Strategy prioritises active travel through the sustainable travel hierarchy, placing walking, wheeling and cycling at the top. This year, the Government's continuing to invest in active travel infrastructure through the Scottish budget that was passed by Parliament, including £226 million for sustainable and active travel. The majority of this will deliver high-quality walking and cycling infrastructure in communities, with inclusive design principles embedded to improve safety and accessibility for more people wanting to make more of their journeys by active travel modes. We're also supporting local authorities through the £14.5 million Road Safety Improvement Fund to enhance safety and reduce the number of injuries on our road networks. I hope these measures give Kate Campbell and her constituents the assurance that the Government prioritises active and safe travel routes and to the encouragement of cycling, walking and wheeling as part of the active travel hierarchy.
Donald McKinnon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today, once again, Uist is receiving a significantly reduced ferry service, with the MV Hebrides out of action and the Lord of the Isles experiencing ongoing technical problems. Last week, the First Minister told us that amplification of these issues is damaging island communities. What is in fact damaging island communities is his government's failure to deliver an adequate ferry service. Results of our recent survey carried out by Visit Out at Hebrides revealed that 96% of businesses responding had encountered problems as a result of ferry disruption this year. These businesses are struggling and need support now. Will the First Minister tell me when the Island Business Resilience Fund will open and whether he will consider widening access to all affected island businesses?
First Minister.
Well, I recognise the importance of these issues, and I think, as Mr McKinnon will know, I'm pretty well versed in the issues and the challenges around the ferry network. When I answered the question last week, the indicators on the ferry service were very strong. Indeed, when I checked the Calmac service update shortly before I came into question time today, most routes are operating normally today, with the exception of the Uig Triangle because of the problems, the mechanical problems with the MV Hebrides. And the MV Lord of the Isles is, of course, operating a service to Uig just now. It was yesterday, certainly. So there are going to be challenges on the ferry network, but I think we're in a more robust and stronger position than we were. The MV Isle of Lewis has returned to the Barra service, which is a welcome development there as well. In relation to the Islands Fund, I confirmed to Parliament last week that this would be happening. The Government will take forward the eligibility criteria. We've delivered funds of this nature in the past, so we know exactly how that's got to be constructed. We have to make an assessment of where the patterns of disruption have taken their course. That was what we applied in previous cases. Now, obviously, there is an aspiration, I accept, for there to be compensation in all circumstances, but there has to be a recognition of scale of disruption as part of that assessment. And that's what the Government will engage on, and will announce shortly the details of how that fund will be taken forward and distributed.
Alan Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister, like me, represents a large area of rural Scotland where people are dependent on domestic heating oil because they're off-grid. Now, there's been some spectacular rises in the cost of that oil, and a lot of my constituents, and I'm sure a lot of our constituents, are deeply worried about that. I've written to the Competition and Markets Authority because I'm concerned about the operation of the market in heating oil. Does the First Minister share my concerns as we look towards a cold winter?
First Minister.
Sure, I do share the concerns that Alan Smith has set out, and like him, I have many constituents who are reliant on domestic heating oil, and some of the increases have been very, very significant. The Government, of course, established the Scottish Emergency Heating Oil Scheme, enabling households to apply for £300 towards their bills. I'm glad to hear that the member has written to the Competition and Markets Authority, because they are currently undertaking a market study into retail supply of heating oil for domestic use in the UK, and the Government's officials are engaged in this work. And of course, this is an issue where we require greater intervention from the United Kingdom Government, and we've been encouraging the United Kingdom Government to do exactly that.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. North East businesses are struggling due to this Government's punishing business rates regime. The Fresh Start initiative is where businesses that move into premises that have been vacant for 6 months receive rates relief for a year. Now, the Press and Journal, the Courier and the Sunday Post are campaigning for that 6 months eligibility period to be scrapped, with the relief applied to any business moving into a vacant unit. Now, the First Minister has expressed support for this campaign. So, could the First Minister confirm what that support looks like in practice, and thus, when will this vital change take place?
First Minister.
What I'd say to Liam Kerr is I recognise the challenges that are coming and facing businesses around our business rates questions. So my engagement with the excellent initiative by the Press and Journal, the Courier and by the Sunday Post on raising awareness about business rates issues and seeking an approach that incentivises growth, that encourages development, that enables businesses to invest for the future and deliver greater economic success is an approach that chimes very directly with the approach of my government and what we want to achieve. So I gave a commitment to the Press and Journal, the Courier and to the Sunday Post that I would look, as I gave to Sir Tom Hunter when I met him a couple of weeks ago to discuss issues in relation to economic development, that I would consider carefully what improvements the government could make as quickly as we possibly can do to make sure that businesses are given the support to enable them to continue to invest and not to have the issues arising out of business rates impeding their success and their growth within the economy.
Willie Rennie.
The First Minister will be aware of the huge fire in my constituency at Lower Melville Wood. It burned for 2 weeks. The conditions were intolerable for local people, especially those with lung conditions. Now, I've written to the government today asking for an investigation, an independent investigation, because it involves multiple agencies into what caused the fire, the handling of the fire, but also the future of the site. Would he agree that there should be an investigation and the government should commission that independent investigation?
First Minister.
I'm very sympathetic to the point that Mr Rennie raises because I want to make sure his constituents are satisfied by the examination of these issues. I recognise the level of inconvenience that, and distress that was caused to members of the public as a consequence of this fire. Now, whether that requires to be an independent investigation is an issue that I'll have to consider in more detail. But I give Mr Rennie the assurance that we need to understand much more effectively the circumstances and causes of incidents of this type. I also think that some of these investigations take far too long, and that's an issue of concern to me because we have to learn the lessons and change practice if it's necessary to be changed at a much swifter pace than we have been up until now. So if I take away those issues and consider, along with through the Justice Secretary, I'll consider these on my behalf and provide me with recommendations as to how we can properly address Mr Rennie's concerns and those of his constituents.
Alex Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The latest release of the Peter Mandelson files has exposed several senior Scottish Labour politicians for maintaining a disturbing and often sycophantic relationship with Peter Mandelson, a man who, it was known, held a close relationship with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, and who remains a member of the House of Lords. What assessment has the First Minister made of these alarming relationships that have been exposed, and what discussion has the Scottish Government had with the UK Labour Government on the latest release of the deeply chilling Peter Mandelson files?
First Minister.
So we've not had dialogue with the UK Government on this question, but what I did do before the election was I authorised the Permanent Secretary to examine all of the issues of engagement between the Scottish Government and Peter Mandelson to satisfy ourselves that there had been no circumstances in which information that was material to the public interest in Scotland had been in any way jeopardised by the contact that had existed or the contacts that existed around about Peter Mandelson. I was satisfied with the assessment that was made by the Permanent Secretary in this respect, but what I would assure Mr Kerr is that notwithstanding these issues, the Scottish Government will always work to promote the interests of Scotland in the international community with the objectives of promoting our cultural interests and in securing investment for Scotland.
Angela Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister. Parking meters came into force in North Berwick yesterday in my region, and local people are worried about what this will mean for the High Street and the local community, and also their livelihoods. The High Street literally went from a bustling hub on Sunday to quite an empty and desolate place on a Monday. It seems the state runs out of money and then it heads straight for the pockets of hard-working people. Does the First Minister accept that current funding framework is driving councils into difficult choices to make up shortfalls, and reform of funding should occur sooner rather than later?
First Minister.
I understand the importance of the point that Angela Ross raises. I visited North Berwick with Mr McLennan during the election campaign, and North Berwick was very, very busy on that occasion, and I could see from my own knowledge of the town it's a very bustling and vibrant community. But obviously I picked up clearly, well, I didn't pick up, I had the concerns it spelt out to me very directly by a number of local businesses on that occasion. So I recognise the seriousness of the points that's raised. Now, obviously, it's a decision that's been taken by East Lothian Council, and it's up to the Council to explain to their constituents exactly why they have taken this decision. When it comes to funding arrangements, of course, what we as a Parliament have got to do is to make sure that we provide the adequate levels of funding on a sustainable basis to a variety of different public organisations, and local authorities will be central to that judgment. So I would simply say that if Parliament wishes to spend more money on local authority services, we have got to be prepared to take the decisions that enable that to be the case. And the Government has, of course, given an increased local authority settlement to local government, and that gets translated into funding for individual local authorities. And we will obviously engage with Parliament about the composition of the budget process or the budget bill as the budget process takes its course through Parliament later this year.
Julie McDougall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister may be aware of a live planning application for a new data centre just outside of Auchtertool. So on the back of last week's energy debate, can the First Minister assure my constituents of Auchtertool that the Scottish Government will take our Community Council's concerns seriously and ensure that planning applications for data centres across Scotland are not imposed or rushed without serious consideration for water and energy demands? Thank you.
First Minister.
Obviously, this is a live planning application, so I can't comment specifically on the details involved. But what I would assure Julie McDougall about is that the planning process must take into account the representations that are made by local communities. There will be statutory considerations to take into account as well. And dependent on the course of that planning application, there may well be determination that the Government has to make. And I would assure Julie McDougall that should the Government be in that position, then the views and the concerns and the issues raised by communities and also by statutory objectors will be considered in detail by the Government in coming to any determination that ministers have got to make.
Polly McNeill.
Thank you. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Board are due to make a decision at the end of June, which could have far-reaching implications for Scotland's communities as there are options for closure. The Union Street fire in Glasgow, which we've discussed before, is a stark reminder of why the City of Glasgow needs a well-resourced fire service to save lives and protect businesses, but with a need for appropriate high-reach appliances. Will the First Minister support my view that, given the concern that all of us will have over this in our constituencies and regions, that there should be parliamentary oversight of this decision, and will the Scottish Government be prepared to look at that and, if necessary, reconsider the funding of the Fire and Rescue Service to ensure that Scotland's communities remain safe?
First Minister.
The issues that are connected with the review undertaken by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service relate to an assessment of current fire risk as it applies in Scotland at the present moment. And of course, we know that over the course of the last 40 years or so, fire risk in Scotland has changed quite significantly. And in some respects, and there's been, thankfully, a welcome decline in domestic fires because of the increase in protective activity that is placed through sprinkler systems and other activities. We've also seen a change in the deployment of the Fire and Rescue Service because of the implications of climate change. There was just a question just a moment ago from Catherine Sangster about the fire on Arthur Seat, which is a very local example of the changing nature of fire risk that is having to be dealt with. So what the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service has got to do is to make an assessment based on that risk and the resources that the Government is making available. And obviously, there will be statutory obligations on the Fire and Rescue Service to exercise its powers, but of course Parliament can consider issues that arise from the decisions that are taken by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. And what I commit the Government to doing is to engaging constructively with members of Parliament, because I recognise the concerns that will exist in all parts of the chamber to make sure that the Fire and Rescue Service comes to the right conclusions in what is an important exercise that is underway.
Michael Mara.
Thank you, President Officer. Both my party and the First Minister's own are committed to vital support for ambitious capital works at Dundee and Angus College. The leadership of the college has waited years for this government to agree to a solution, and I can now confirm that the deadline to address rack problems at the Kingsway campus in Dundee has been missed. What can the First Minister say to us about when we will finally get a decision from this government?
As Mr Mara will know, the issues that are at stake here are about long-term financial commitments to support an ambitious development, I would say, by Dundee and Angus College. And I should probably just place on record the fact that I represent a constituency that is adjacent to Dundee and Angus, so there may be implications for my constituents, just for absolute transparency. But so the questions that have been wrestled with are about how long-term financial assurance can be given to Dundee and Angus College to enable them to enter into commitments which would undertake what I would recognise to be a significant regeneration opportunity within the city centre of Dundee. So I assure Mr Mara that those issues have been given active consideration within government. They're not straightforward because of the nature of the commitments that are sought. But equally, the challenges in the college infrastructure are not straightforward, nor are they sustainable because of the issues that Mr Mara cites. But I give him the assurance that these issues are actively being taken forward by ministers.
Callum Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Unite, the Union, has rightly called out the Labour Westminster Government for easing sanctions on aviation fuel produced from Russian oil, while allowing Scotland's refinery at Grangemouth to close. Let's be clear. Keir Starmer will reward Putin by bringing in jet fuel made from Russian oil. Can the First Minister today reaffirm his government solidarity with Ukraine? And will he join me in condemning this betrayal of the Ukrainian people and Scotland's energy workers?
First Minister.
So my government's support for the people of Ukraine is absolute, and it's been a central part of the position of this Parliament of being so supportive of the people of Ukraine in the terror that they face from the Putin regime. Now, obviously, the issue, one of the biggest vulnerabilities we have is around about the production of jet fuel, which is why I find it inexplicable that the UK government, which assured everybody that it would protect the refinery at Grangemouth, has allowed the refinery to close. So I reaffirm my strong support for the people of Ukraine, my strong support for the sustainability of our energy industries to make sure that the energy needs of our country can be met by the activities that we undertake here in Scotland.
Michelle Campbell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Report after report shows food prices continuing to rise and the need for government to act. Now, we know the Labour UK government has been caught out, begging supermarkets to lower prices rather than taking action like the Scottish Government to ensure a food price cap. Given what we know now, does the First Minister expect Westminster to try and block our food price cap plan?
First Minister.
So the Government is committed to bringing forward legislation to ensure that individuals are able to afford a range of items in our supermarkets at an affordable price. That is the commitment of my government. We are developing that legislation. We'll engage with Parliament about that legislation to make sure that we can take the practical and tangible action to support members of the public who are experiencing such significant pressures as a consequence of the cost of living issues with which they are wrestling.
And the final question of this afternoon's session, Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you. Over the weekend, the SNP's new Energy Minister said the Scottish Government's energy strategy may not be ready until the end of the year. This is a shocking dereliction of the duty of this SNP government. Oil and gas workers are losing their jobs now, and Aberdeen is suffering damaging anti-oil and net zero policies by Ed Miliband. Yet the SNP still has a presumption against oil and gas developments in the North East. Presiding Officer, what on earth will it take for this SNP government to wake up to the crisis in our oil and gas industry and support drilling now?
First Minister.
As I've explained to Parliament on a number of occasions, I explained it to Malcolm Offord in First Minister's questions last week, the Scottish Government's position is a position founded in the existing law of the United Kingdom, which is that if we are to take forward new developments, there has to be a climate compatibility assessment undertaken to ensure its compatibility with net zero. That is what the legal framework is of the United Kingdom today. And that's, as a government that operates within the law, that is exactly the position that we take. Now, I've also said that because of the very volatile situation that we now experience in the Middle East, issues of energy security need to be taken into account in the judgments that are formed. And of course, I've just answered a question from members about the issue in relation to jet fuel and the damage that's been done because of the closure of Grangemouth. That extends our energy vulnerability. So let me say to Rachel Hamilton that the Scottish Government has a very clear position which is set out in relation to oil and gas, which has been communicated by me on multiple occasions. And at the heart of the question that Rachel Hamilton put to
Mr. Flynn, you're not in Westminster now.
Was her... well, at the heart of the question that Rachel Hamilton put to me was decision-making by Ed Miliband. Now, I just want to clarify, Ed Miliband is not a member of my government. He is a member of the hostile United Kingdom Labour government who don't deliver for the people of Scotland. It's a good job the people of Scotland have a Scottish government to rely upon.
That concludes First Minister's questions. I apologise to the huge number of backbenchers who we couldn't call. There's always next week. The next item of business is a statement by Mary McCallan on phone-free classrooms. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, and there should be no interventions or interruptions. I'll leave a 1-minute break for everyone to reassemble and take their seats.